Deepest desire is to have reconciliation in every relationship. Whenever there's conflict, it feels like a speed bump for me that I can't get across because all I can think about is how I want this relationship to be better and reconciled. And I want to make sure that the other person feels valued and seen in spite of whatever conflict that there is between us. But the truth is that sometimes conflict happens and you don't get to decide what the other person feels or does with that conflict. And today I want to talk about that because it's been coming up quite a bit in my surroundings. And I think it's important to understand how to have conflict and not have a casualty in your relationship. Somewhere along the line, we have forgotten how to talk to each other and how to really be able to have conflict without losing the relationship in the process. So recently I had a conversation with someone that started out well and then turned into a political conversation because something that I said sort of triggered this thought in this person's brain. And the interesting thing about it was that because I didn't have the same opinion as this other person, it sort of riled them up and got them very passionate, which is okay to be passionate about that. But when I said I wasn't interested in having these conversations, it then turned into that person becoming really angry. And I don't really think that it benefits anyone for us to have fights and arguments, especially when you really feel strongly about what you believe. I don't think I'm going to change anybody's opinion, but how do you save the relationship? How do you keep that from turning into the other person feeling insulted or feeling like they don't have value or they don't matter? And how do you save the relationship in spite of the disagreement that you don't see things the same way? How do you keep that communication open so that you salvage the relationship? And sometimes, rather than arguing that you're right and arguing to win the conversation, sometimes you just have to say, I'm just not going to have this conversation with you and I wish you the best. And that's really hard because my greatest desire is to find a space where we can get along, to find the common ground where we are both aligned and that the relationship is more important than the topic that we're disagreeing on. But I don't get to choose how the other person shows up. And that's a really hard concept for a lot of people. Truly, the only person that you are ever going to be able to control in your life is going to be yourself. You can't tell people who they're going to be. You can't expect them to do anything. All you can do is decide how you're going to show up in this circumstance. In this type of conversation, that's not the first time that I've had this interaction with other people. I've had an interaction with a young woman that comes in and out of my life periodically where sometimes she has worked herself up and decided that she's angry with me and she will share the things that she's feeling. And sometimes it's hurtful and sometimes it doesn't feel very good to receive that information from her. But every single time, I have reminded myself who I will be when I show up. And I'm always going to show up as a kind version of myself. I don't demand, I don't, here's my rights. This is what you absolutely will not treat me this way. I don't turn into this, I will be respected kind of person. Instead, I just look at them and I say, you know what? I'm going to let you have that. I'm going to let you be in that space and I'm not going to participate. And that's my first lesson is not every conflict needs participation. Not every time somebody wants to engage an argument with you, do you have to actually participate. You don't actually have to show up for the conversation. You have all of the autonomy in you to say, you know what, I love you and I'm not having this conversation and just leave it at that. How many times I have received multiple texts from that person after I stopped communicating and I just decided I wasn't going to respond. And the reason that I don't respond is not because I'm better than them. It's not because I think I know everything and haha, this is how I have power over you. Honestly, even if I showed up with the facts, even if I had all the arguments in the world, even if I was right, sometimes it doesn't help. And sometimes the truth is that they're in a space that you can't reach them and you're not going to reach them with any words that you use. It's just by your actions. It's just by your kindness that you allow to be the voice. And boy, is that a beautiful thing when that happens because, when you engage with somebody, I had another woman in my life years ago that I had to interact with because she was a part of our life that I just couldn't avoid. And when we would engage and I knew something was absolutely right and I wanted to defend it, I wanted to argue it, whenever I did, it was like it was leveled up. And then I would come back and then she would level up even more. And then I would come back and she would level up even more. And eventually I just realized that I had boundaries that this other woman didn't have. And every time she leveled up above anything that I had to say, it hurt because I had set a boundary for myself and I wasn't going to be that person. And I allowed myself to be that person. And it wasn't her fault. It was me. I made that decision to allow myself to lose self-control, to allow myself to get angry, to allow myself to get loud. And it never felt good. It didn't matter if I was 100% right. I heard this a long time ago. You can be 100% right, but 100% wrong at the top of your voice. And that is so true because the way that we deliver information is how people are going to filter it. And if you're screaming at them, they're certainly not going to agree with you. They're going to feel attacked, even if you're coming from a place that is truthful and loving, or in your own mind, you think you are. And if you've ever watched my video on the inside outside, on the inside, you know how you feel, but on the outside, you often don't know how you're projecting. And the same goes for the other person. You can see their outside, you're judging them for their outside, but you don't know what's going on the inside of them. And that leads me to the second point, which is usually what you're fighting about isn't really what you're fighting about. The issue isn't the issue. The issue is something that they've got going on. They're fearful or they're angry or they think somehow you're going to think less of them because of, or you're not going to respect them, or they're not going to get what they deserve, or there's all kinds of turmoil that's happening inside of people that we don't get to see, and the thoughts that are going through their mind that we don't get to hear. And usually it's not being communicated very well through their actions. And we are the same. The way that we are communicating what we're feeling, the other person doesn't always receive it the same way that we think we are delivering. And so we have to give grace and sometimes listen to what we don't want to really hear without responding in a way that makes it worse. And sometimes my response is, I really appreciate you sharing, and how can I make this right? Instead of defending myself or trying to let the person know that I had the right or my feelings matter too, instead of all of that, I just allow them to speak. I allow them to share what they're feeling because I don't know what's really going on the inside. And I really value that relationship. And I want to make sure that I keep the door open so that if in the future this person wants to be or needs me in some way, I want to be there. I want to be available because I want to be helpful, because my deepest desire is to be in right relationship with people. And also, you have to be careful when you're communicating with people that you're not matching their energy. People get angry, they get loud, so you get louder. Just like I told you with my friend that I had to interact with for a very long time. I would often energy match, and it never made me feel any better. And the truth is that you are only in control of yourself. And being in control of yourself means being in control of the way that you respond to other people. I love this story. I think it was John Maxwell that told it. It's a man that would go down and get a newspaper every morning, and the person working the newspaper stand hardly would even engage with him. He would come up and say, "I'll take a newspaper," and the guy would give him a paper, and he would go, "Thank you so much," and the guy would just kind of look at him and go, "Mm." And he would never respond, and never, no matter how much he was nice, no matter how many times he tried to be this kind person, no matter what he would say, no matter what he would ask, none of it, the guy would just be rude to him. And this particular day, his friend went with him to go get a newspaper, and it was the same interaction. I got the newspaper, he was nice. The guy selling the newspaper, not so nice. And as they were walking away, his friend said to him, "Why do you do that? The guy is a jerk to you every single time you go to get a newspaper. Why are you still nice to him?" And the person that was buying the newspaper said this. He said, "I don't let other people's behavior determine how I show up." And I really love that because that's the truth. I can only control me. I can only decide how I am going to behave. I cannot decide how anybody else shows up into the world, how they're having their day, how they're going to respond to me. Nothing. I cannot control other people. I can only control myself. And at the end of the day, I want to be proud of the way that I showed up. And most of the time, not all of the time, But most of the time, when I do that, when I decide I'm going to show up the way that I need to show up as a kind and compassionate and understanding person, I get a positive result from it. Maybe it's somebody was watching and they make a comment about how kind I am. Or maybe it is the person that I interacted with coming back to me and saying, you know what? I don't know why I did that. I'm really sorry. And sometimes I don't get to see it all, but I get to sleep well at night because when I lay my head down on the pillow, I'm proud of the person that I am. I'm proud of how I showed up and I'm proud of why I showed up. And if you've followed me for any amount of time, you know my story about this, my thumb. So I have this tattoo on my thumb, and it reminds me that when I get angry, it does nothing to make people better. It does nothing to make the world a better place. And it does nothing for what God's intention is for my life and for their life. And so it helps me to remember that when someone is harsh, I can be kind. And when someone is attacking, I can respond with compassion. And when someone is angry, you can choose to be calm. We get a chance. We have an opportunity to show up as the person that we want to be. In every situation, with every individual, we don't have to lose our temper. And I'm not talking about being absolutely 100% guru, like, all the time. I'm talking about when you find yourself, when you feel that elevation. And this happened to me yesterday. I was on a conversation with somebody. The person was very passionate. I told you about it. He started talking about politics and I felt this anger rising in me and this like I had to defend myself. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that he was, kind of attacking. And it made me feel like I suddenly was on trial when I'm not a politician and I just don't feel like that's an important thing to even argue about. And it just raised this instinct in me to want to fight back. And I found myself raising my voice while I was talking. And then I stopped and I went, "What are you doing, Kimberly? This is not who you are anymore. This is not what you do." It's why I wrote that on my hand to remind myself, because like when I'm driving or I'm pushing the grocery cart, that's when I get the most anger and road rage. And it's there to remind me that I'm going to do better for this world if I remain calm. I'm going to be a better service to the people around me if I show up as the best version of myself. And I stopped and I said, "You know what? I'm not having this conversation with you and I love you and I wish you the best." And later on that evening, he texted me and he said he was really sorry and he didn't know why that went that way. And I have some understanding of what happens inside of us when we get so riled up. Sometimes the person that's there that receives that from us just happens to be in the way. They just happen to be the person that's there, but really we're dealing with something inside that is greater than the argument that we're having with that person. We are feeling emotions and putting them on the other person, but the reality is that we're dealing with something that has nothing to do with them. They just happen to be the person that was there at the time. And if you can find a way to remind yourself it's not about you, and don't take it personally, and remember that the relationship is far greater, far more important than this interaction that you're having with them, you're going to be proud of yourself at night when you go to sleep. And you're going to see the blessing of responding that way. It's not easy. You have to set aside pride. You have to tell yourself that it's okay if people don't like you, that it's okay if people disrespect you, and that it's okay if they're going to say things that aren't the best. And you have to live with that. You have to find a place inside of you where your value doesn't come from what other people think. And that's a hard place to be at. But I tell you what, if you're anything like me and your deepest desire is to have reconciliation, then you have to keep the door open. You have to allow space for people to make mistakes. And then you have to be willing to be there when they come back. And honestly, no argument is worth losing a friendship over. No argument is worth losing a family member over. Life is about relationships and how we handle them and how we love on each other. And there's no greater gift than a friend, because the hardest parts of life are way harder when you do them alone. So keep in mind, you can't control how other people behave, but you can control how you behave. And that starts with keeping your side of the street clean. This is a hard lesson for me to learn, and I'm still I'm still learning it, but I deeply want resolution. I deeply want reconciliation. I deeply want my friends to know that they matter to me. Because really, that's what we're all saying, right? Do I have value? Do I matter? Am I important? Yes. Yes, you are. And the things that you can control, you can apologize, you can listen, and you can be kind. And at the end of it, that's all you can control. And hopefully, you'll get a text message like I did that said, I'm really sorry. I don't know why I acted that way. I hope this helps.